This is HBR News number 538, Education Sucks for All Kids, Boys Most Affected, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello everyone and welcome back to Honey Badger Radio's news show. I am your host Brian. I'm joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts Hannah Wallen and Dr. Ranimercam.
Hello.
On today's HBR News Show, we're going to be discussing the arrest of former CNN anchor Don Lemon, boys failing in education, and the data that has recently been released on that, and more, so stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So this has been doing the rounds, and I thought it might be interesting because, we have Piers Morgan, okay?
Look at this soggy puddle of a man. I know this is a channel where we're supposed to be compassionate to men of all kinds, but I have to make an exception for Piers Morgan. Look at him. He's not a human. He's a stain on the carpet of a human.
Well, Piers Morgan had an accident.
She did promise to love, honor, cherish, and obey in sickness and in health, unless she's one of those women that had the vows altered because she couldn't handle the marriage version of marriage.
She is a modern woman, I think, and modern meaning like in the last 50 years. But
yeah. Raise your hand in the chat if you're a Gen Xer and Brian just got a song stuck in your head.
So Piers Morgan had a bit of an accident. He fell and broke his hip. Now, when you get to this age and you break your hip or you have some kind of hip injury, it's usually a bad sign. Like people who break their hips in their 60s or whatever his age is, I think he's in his 60s. That usually means that they're like nearing the end. For whatever reason, that's like the thing that you don't really recover from. But he's been hospitalized, and his wife is taking care of him. But she is apparently, it seems as though, because some people are saying they're just banting together, like they're an old couple and they mess with each other a lot. But it might be the case that she's fatigued from having to actually care for her husband. So she wrote this op-ed in the Telegraph that kind of shames Piers Morgan for, I guess, daring to get hurt. And it's by Celia Walden, who didn't even take his name, which is kind of weird. Caring for my invalid husband Piers is the biggest test of our wedding vows. I signed up to in sickness and in health, but it's almost 2 weeks since he broke his hip, and my patience with my patient is wearing thin. So
in 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yep.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Like how long are you going to be in Mars for? 2 weeks.
Just a thing, all right? When I say it's a serious injury, I'm not being hyperbolic here. Like a third of people over 50 who break a hip die within the next year.
Yeah.
Okay. It's really bad. And he's well over 50.
Yeah, so we're going to be reading this article in the patron show and getting a sense of what this is all about, and if we get to it. We often don't finish articles in the patron show, but we're going to try, because I always try. So if you want to join us for that and you want to talk, I
don't wish ill on Piers Morgan, but if ill happens to happen to him, I'm like, anyway. So tune in for that in the after show.
The funny thing about this too is that Piers Morgan has been very concerned with, like the Zoomers and Zoomer men in particular, and their concerns or criticisms for women and the feminist movement, etc., and its consequences. And he's been one of these kind of like man up and deal with it kind of people, and now he's potentially on the receiving end of this reality. So anyway, if you guys want to join us for the patron show where we'd like read through this article and discuss it, you will have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord server where you'll be able to watch all the additional content like all of our other patron shows, as well as sort of like previewing things that we're working on. Allison has little groups that she does. We also have game nights, movie nights, etc. I think they're usually playing games after the shows today, including after the patron show. So, lots going on in the server, and it is a positive community. And yeah, so please consider joining us. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that our content has been erased, redacted from the internet like the Epstein files, then please go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com to find where our content lives. That's feedthebadger.com, not feed the badger, I'm sorry, badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com. And with all that said, let us get into today's stories. So, worst journalist of the year 2014, according to the Columbia Journalism Review, Don Lemon may be facing jail time over his participation in an anti-ICE disruption event. Lemon, famous for suggesting that the missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 could have been sucked into a black hole, which would have been really cool if it was true, was one of the many mentally unhinged losers that crowded into St. Paul's City's church mid-service and began harassing and screaming at churchgoers and clergy. The group did so after being tipped off that one of the church leaders may have been a white supremacist. The church leader was not present at the time. Lemon, along with 8 others present at the disruption, have been indicted on one count of conspiracy against religious freedom at a place of worship and injuring, intimidating, and interfering with the exercise of the right of religious freedom at a place of worship. Lemon was arrested while covering the Grammys, but was shortly released on his own recognizance and with no bond.
Nobody recognizes him.
Recognizance is what I meant to say.
I know.
Sorry.
So what do you reckon? Do we think he's going to prison? I guess it depends on what kind of judge he gets. Any given libtard judge anywhere in the country can veto anything the president tries to do, so they can sure as hell get Don Lemon off. They're very much in the habit of sending dead to rights guilty murderers and rapists back onto the street 72 times, especially if they are of a certain racial persuasion. And that's just in, low profile cases. At least they are low profile until they commit a crime against a woman. Then people start giving a shit. I mean, if Minnesota was putting its criminals in jail, they'd be $19 billion better off. And ICE wouldn't need to be there in the first place. So, yeah, no. For Don Lemon to end up in prison, he would need to be found guilty by a jury of his peers. Then he'd need to face a judge who's not a flaming bender of a leftist, or otherwise neatly tucked into the pocket of flaming leftist benders. Both the judge and the jury would have to face the implicit threat of violent retribution and nationwide race riots, much like in the Derek Chauvin trial. It's hard to get anything done when you're being held hostage by racist mobs in the government and the racist mobs they're commanding in the streets. Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, and she is, because the mob came and threw acid in her face the last time she tried to punish a gay black man for a crime he was caught committing on camera. Don Lemon is not going to prison, not a snowball's chance in hell, and even if he did, he'd probably enjoy it. There's not much you can do but threaten him with a good time, if you know what I mean. Yeah, no, he'll get off scot-free and he'll continue terrorizing churches and getting away with it. Probably. I'm not 100% certain. I mean, this time 2 weeks ago, I didn't think he'd even get arrested, but here we are. Maybe this administration will surprise us again and actually enact some law and order. Although if they did that, Tim Walz would be in Guantanamo Bay yesterday, getting waterboarded with mashed up bananas and rice. Get back to me when that shit starts happening. And remember, it's not about the bananas and rice. It's about the bananas and rice. I think you understand.
Yep. One thing that you could tell that he was trying to prove something when he went in there. He was trying to prove something. Don't know exactly what he was trying to prove, but there was something that he did help to prove. There's been a few things that have come out since, a few other not directly related events, but related events that have come out since. The parent that had to confront her school, for instance, her kid's school, because they sent children out to protest with anti-ICE protesters. Not before the two incidents that have been so controversial, the two shooting incidents, not before those two happened. After liberals have been running around online for the last couple of weeks screaming that ICE shoots innocent people without provocation wherever they go. They sent children to protest against a group of people they were saying does that, right? And here he is going into a church full of people that are not the individual that he's wanting to expose. And when that guy's not there, he terrorizes the people in the church, including children. And of course, it has come out that tens of thousands of children that the Biden administration lost have been located, and many of them were human trafficking victims. And if it wasn't for ICE, they still would be. They still would be. Boys and girls, little boys and little girls who have been ripped away from their parents and sold into slavery. But the biggest issue on this guy's plate was, I got to prove this one person at this one church is maybe a white supremacist. And like that's their priorities. And they will trample children on their way through. The left, the right may not be your best friend, right? We know that the man up mantra is on both sides. We know that right-wing politicians don't treat fathers with very much sympathy, and they don't give a shit about your due process rights unless you're a politician. We know that there's been a serious issue on both sides of the political fence of treating men like perpetual bad guys anytime there's a conflict between any male entity or organization and any female entity or organization. But the left has proved during this past month that they are evil. They're not just trying to make a point, right? They're not just trying to protect some people. They don't care about people. They care about winning. They care about loading the polls. They care about replacing you because you won't do what they want. And they can more easily enslave populations from other countries that come here out of desperation or to commit crimes. So they're perfectly willing to go into a church and scare the fuck out of a bunch of little kids who are just there with their parents singing Jesus Loves You, who don't really maybe even understand what's going on or why these people are in there yelling at them. And they're perfectly willing to send children, young teenagers, junior high school kids, into an environment that they just spent the last 2 weeks telling you is deadly for the side that they're sending them in to march on. They're perfectly willing to let children be trafficked as long as they win. So I don't feel bad about calling them evil at this point. That's evil. That's not just run-of-the-mill selfishness. That's not just run-of-the-mill self-important. Oh, we're so important that nobody else matters. That is downright demonic evil. And they'll probably get away with it. because nobody else wants to say that, right? Nobody else wants to come down that hard. Oh, you can't call the other side evil. That makes you just as bad as they are. It doesn't matter if they're selling children to be raped and enslaved. It doesn't matter if they're terrorizing children. It doesn't matter if they're uh, it doesn't matter what they're doing. If that doesn't matter if they're sending children into an environment they told you was deadly. You're the bad guy if you call them out on it, right? Because you say the same things, even if you don't do the same things. Well, I'm done. I don't care if people say you're just as bad because you say the same things. Fuck, call me just as bad. Just let the trafficking of children be stopped. Right? Let the replacement of nations full of people be stopped. Let the theft of elections be stopped. And let dipshittery like what Don Lemon did, like going into a church and terrorizing a group of people that has nothing to do with what you're mad about. Let that be stopped. You wouldn't put up with it if he had a different reason for doing it. You wouldn't put up with it if he hated them for the color of their skin, especially if they were Black or Latino. So you shouldn't put up with it now. And that's it.
But see, what Don Lemon did was just a misdemeanor, and that's not a crime, according to Don Lemon.
Yeah,
crossing the border illegally is not a crime. It's just against the law.
If I get convicted of one, I could never work in my field again. But nobody stops journalists from being criminals, or criminals from being journalists, for that matter. I guess my field has more integrity.
All right. Well, let us know what you guys think about this in the comments. I was going to mention the irony of the thing that basically the law that he broke. It was under something called the FACE Act. The FACE Act is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, also known as the Access Act. It is a U.S. federal law enacted in 1994, signed by President Bill Clinton. It was passed in response to escalating violence and blockades against abortion clinics in the early 90s, including murders of providers and large-scale protests that obstructed access. But there was also an act that was meant to keep the Klan out from harassing black churches, and so the KKK.
And the worst part of it is those people probably would never have gone in there if they didn't think they were getting publicity from that fucknut.
Yeah.
The dumbest people on the left are the ones that are going, "Oh, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just there as a journalist." No. He was there to feed the fire. He's a bellows. It's not his job to promote this shit by giving it press. That's not how that works, right? It in fact, if you find out something like that's going to happen, being a journalist doesn't stop you from being responsible to report it to police. If I find out a robbery is going to happen in my neighborhood, and I find out ahead of time, and maybe I find out a group of women's going to do it, and I want to get video of women committing a robbery so I can show that look, women commit crimes too. And I try to hide behind, "Oh, well, I'm a journalist, so I just wanted to record the event." You can damn well bet my ass to be in jail for conspiracy to commit that crime, because I knew about it ahead of time, and I let it happen, and I organized with them so I could be there and take pictures or film them. Yeah, that wouldn't go over well here, and he shouldn't get away with it either.
And imagine if you did it in a synagogue. You'd be fucking hanging from a rope in a torture garden.
Yep.
Or a mosque.
Or a mosque, yeah.
All right. Well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I'm going to read your super chats, and we're going to move on to the next story. My guess is that he's not going to serve any serious time. He's well connected, and I think that depending on the amount of reach he has, he could get a pretty light sentence, if anything at all. He said he's looking forward to his day in court. I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll follow up. We'll see. I mean, like, ultimately, this comes down to how much clout do these people have, and we have to look at it on a case by case basis. So, but I think that he is extremely unpopular at this point, and I'll
Yeah.
take it. You know,
Oh,
that's
he's
all I'm
wrecked his
saying.
career for sure. And I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, he's done.
as
He's
someone
like
who's
Joy
worked in the
Reid
field,
finished. Yeah.
yeah, he's going to become kryptonite to any respectable news organization. Like, I've worked with people like this that they made themselves the story. They wanted to be, the guy that got, the big story, and they did things that are unethical and ridiculous. And not only did they not get hired by other respectable publications, but they did get penalties. They did get into trouble. And I have seen people get into trouble for everything from minor crimes to actual assault in the course of, I'm a journalist, so I'm above the law. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
The
Oh,
only thing that is protected is you can't be your reporting of something that is not classified cannot be criminalized. The fact that you published it cannot be criminalized. But conspiring to make something happen or allow something to happen without notifying police if it's criminal, you're not protected. And if you participate in a crime in order to get that, you're not protected. If you go someplace where you're not legally allowed to go, if you trespass, you're not protected. If you harass people, if you commit some kind of crime in the process of getting your coverage, you're not protected. Free speech isn't a free pass to commit crimes against other people. It doesn't erase other people's boundaries. People who think that deserve their consequences. He's probably not going to face those consequences, but he should.
And yeah, he hasn't destroyed his career. You'll notice as soon as he got out of custody, he was invited onto the Jimmy Kimmel show.
Oh God.
Yeah,
So
he's
the least respectable outlet on all of television, the guy that made out with a monkey on television. I'm not kidding. Well, a chimpanzee, not actually a monkey, but still, Jimmy Kimmel made out with a chimpanzee on television. I remember it from the Man Show.
it did
Come
all kinds
on.
of things, but
he'll get money. He'll still be able to make money, and he'll still be able to go on. He'll still be able to go on shows like Jimmy Kimmel.
yeah, he'll be
But
treated like the Rosa Parks of his generation.
oh yeah,
And if he actually goes to jail, he'll be treated like the fucking Malcolm X of his generation, because
by
these
those
people
people.
are
But nobody with
unscrupulous.
nobody with any credibility, nobody that people really listen to, nobody that anybody takes seriously is going to give him the time of day for a while.
We'll
Okay.
see.
So I got some super chows to read out. Let's do that. First of all, we got one yesterday at 1 a.m. from Art Fours. Thank you. And he gives us $60 and says Trixie time zones. I imagine that was trying to get in before the end of the fundraiser. So thank you, Art Fours. Now, today we got one from Meredith G for $5, and she says HBR News 538. You all realize that Don Lemon could be prosecuted under the Klan Act. This pulls it into federal court, but everyone should be concerned about Bondi prosecuting this case. That woman is the dangerous combination of corrupt and incompetent. Yeah, we want
That is true.
We want Scam Bondi out of there. If hopefully that will happen, we'll have to see. And then I got one from Zeranx for $5, and he says Don Lemon infringed on religious rights covered by the First Amendment in our Constitution and attempted to utilize the right to a free press, also covered by the First Amendment, as cover, thereby corrupting the First Amendment overall. He proved that it's not just government that can threaten constitutional rights. I say Don Lemon attacked a piece of the foundation for these United States, so he attacked the country itself. Contrary to comedian Dave Smith's issue that going after Lemon makes him bigger, what I've tried to lay out is too big to leave Don Lemon alone. He's committed treason as those who'd benefit our current and would-be enemies of the United States. Am I wrong? No. I think that you're right about all that stuff. And I guess we'll see what the courts say ultimately.
A lot of the
But
way people is reacting to this indicates that they never should have stopped teaching about civics and civil rights and the interaction between you and government in general in schools. Like, people don't understand the difference between the free ability to discuss and describe things versus getting in someone's face, trespassing on their property, imposing yourself against their will, and so on. The ability to speak, the freedom to speak, does not guarantee you an audience. You can say anything you want. People have the right to walk away from you. You don't have the right to corner them. You don't have the right to grab them. You don't have the right to invade their property and shout at them. And you don't have the right to make them afraid to leave so that they will listen to you. You simply don't. And it isn't about speech at that point. It's about taking away someone else's freedom of movement. And you don't have the right to take away someone else's freedom of movement in order to exercise your right to free speech.
mm-hmm. Richard Bier gives us $5 and says, these are the same kind of people who would be accusing random people of witchcraft a few centuries ago. All right. Yeah, thanks guys for your thoughts on that. Like I said, we will see. But at least we're seeing like the beginnings of consequences, or at least like a recognition that there should be consequences coming from, I think a lot of the people who are not a part of the machine are definitely waking up to this stuff. So, all right. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I see the special chat is alive and well, and they are active. So welcome to the stream, people in the vertical watching on your mobile devices. Pink the Landonly, Roboby, Matt Tellis, and others. I see you all, Sputnik J. Welcome to the stream. So, all right. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. It's time for us to move on to the next story. So we're going to be talking about boys in education. Really important. So American students' reading performance has declined overall. So like education has been crap for all kids of all ages in all grades, but in particular for boys. Okay. So with test scores reaching historic lows and fewer completing entire books. A January 2026 New York Times analysis drawing on Stanford's Educational Opportunity Project led by Sean Reardon, shows boys lagging significantly behind girls in reading across nearly every U.S. district and grade level, a persistent global pattern that has widened since the mid-2010s. Boys trail by about 3/4 of a year in fourth grade, so that's like almost a whole year in fourth grade, and roughly a full year by 12th grade on assessments like state tests and NAEP, unlike targeted efforts that narrowed girls' gaps in math and science. So like there have been efforts to raise girls' grades that are targeted at girls for the desire to raise girls up, to lift them up in specifically math and science. Boys' reading challenges have seen limited focus intervention, i.e. none, contributing to their lower school engagement, reduced college attendance, and broader academic difficulties, as strong reading skills underpin success across subjects and higher education. This gap arises from minor biological elements. This is according to the study that was done. Girls' earlier language development, boys' higher cases of dyslexia and ADHD, amplified by social factors like stereotypes, parental biases favoring girls' literacy, teacher perceptions, and classroom norms rewarding attentiveness more typical in girls. Experts stress these disparities are malleable, evidenced by girls' math improvements through societal changes, and recent data from the NAEP trends from 2024-2025 confirms this reading gender gap favoring girls remains robust, though pandemic effects sometimes widened other disparities, such as lower income areas or in certain subjects. Solutions include early kindergarten interventions, small group tutoring benefiting boys notably, evidence-based phonics, whole book assignments, cross-subject literacy, student book choice, and male role models, reading for pleasure to build interest, confidence, and long-term success in education and beyond. And before we get much more into this or like hand it off to you guys, I want to add that we've been watching this problem grow over basically since I've been working at this channel like 10, 12 years ago, since like 2014. I think I started doing this 2013, 2014. And there's a number of reasons why this is not working out. And I've done teaching a bit on the side. I did substitute teaching for a year. And I noticed, and I knew about this already, the books that boys are reading in school or that children are reading in school are not books that boys are interested in. So the problem is that they treat boys and girls the same. They think that they both would take equal interest in something if you encourage both of them to do it. But the stories or the books they choose are the kinds of books that girls tend to like. And what I mean is, boys want to read about adventures, they want to read about action, they want to read about nonfiction, maybe something historical, something that's about, science or something that is fascinating to them. I know when I was growing up, I liked dinosaurs, I liked the solar system, I liked space stuff, I liked science fiction, I liked horror, and things like that, and there were these classical literature books like Red Badge of Courage, like All's Quiet on the Western Front, like Catcher in the Rye, like Huckleberry Finn, like all these other, Mark Twain. And kids don't read any of these now. All the books that they're reading in school are modern books. They're not challenging for boys or of interest to them. They're not getting the time machine. They're not getting, these kind of like interesting stories. They're getting books about relationships. They're getting books about, that are social dynamics. They're not reading 1984.
They're getting pornography.
Or they're getting pornography. Exactly. So the what I'm saying is the content is not the stuff that gets boys' imaginations going. So they're not drawn to it. And then when they don't take an interest, they blame it on ADHD or dyslexia. But this is something that didn't exist when I was a kid. So I think it really comes down to a couple of things. The stories are not what boys want to read. The other thing is that there are no male teachers. So they keep saying there should be male role models, but why are there no male teachers? Well, because male teachers they have a harder time getting a job in education. And a lot of it has to do with the way that men in general are treated in the workplace. So you're not going to get as many male teachers. You're not going to get the kinds of stories that boys want to read. And they're not teaching boys in a way that boys learn. So they're going to fall behind. They have been falling behind, and we're getting the data on this. Now you have boys that are reading boys and girls, by the way, are both doing poorly, but boys are doing way worse than girls are. And they're still not calling it a gendered issue. They're calling it, well, we need to work on education, but boys are just failing. We don't understand. Why haven't they cashed in on their male privilege to just read better? So this is a problem. And by the way, just as an aside, it's not just a public school problem. This is a problem in charter schools, private schools, Catholic schools. The problem is they all are getting their curriculums or where they take it from the same places. And so there has to be something done at another level beyond that. So it's not simply a matter of school choice or, sending your kids to charter schools. I think homeschooling is probably the best thing, but the other thing is, the other challenge with that is that isn't really practical for a lot of people. It's not something they can do. So this is something that has to basically be discussed, and we need to look at the way that boys are learning. We have to undo this myth that boys and girls learn the same way, and we have to start fresh with something brand new. But anyway,
well,
that's it. That's all I want to say about that.
There's another thing about this. The feminization of the public school system has really destroyed boys' education in a lot of ways. There's a type of learning called discovery learning that, well, let me put it this way. Probably that's how most of you learned how to whistle. And like, if you remember learning how to whistle, nobody can, people could try to explain it to you, right? But it's something that doesn't happen until you figure it out for yourself. It's how you learned how to walk. It's how you learned how to speak. It's how you learned how to pick up a spoon and use it to pick up your food and carry the food to your mouth. It's your way of learning almost everything that you learn. And it is the most discouraged method of learning in the public school system. Private schools aren't a whole lot better because they all start from this position that you cannot learn without instruction, when actually your teacher's supposed to be there to guide your discovery and just sort of nudge a little bit as you're needed and give you some parameters. Let's discover some things about this specific topic. And in different subjects, there are different ways to do that. But in reading, it really relies on practice, like out loud, and the individual being able to choose subjects that the individual is interested in. And teachers don't make room for that if they're female. And my dad used to tell the story of one of his students that was failing in reading in high school. And he had this kid. He was trying to get this kid to at least do the assignment of read something and then explain it back, so that you can prove that you understood the content of what you read and the context, that you were able to at least practically apply it in your head. And he couldn't get him to do it. But then he noticed that this kid always had like muscle car magazines and stuff like that. And he started asking him about them. Kid wanted to be a mechanic. And so he started giving him assignments about cars and motorcycles and stuff like that. Explain to me, how to repair this type of problem with this type of engine. And it took a little bit, but the kid started becoming better able to finish the assignments, read something, and then explain it back to him in a manner in which the reader of his writing could understand. And he went from failing to getting above average grades in one classroom year. This wasn't, it seems like it's a miracle, but it was basically just, tailoring to the kid's needs. And he looked like he was going to be all right. And the next year, he had all female teachers, and they wouldn't let him do that. And he ended up flunking out of school, and he ended up in jail. He ended up going down the wrong path. And that always broke my dad's heart. He had him started, and he had demonstrated what the kid needed. And because it wasn't the rules are the kid has to read this material. The rules are the kid has to be interested in whatever we say he's got to be interested in. He has to be able to do that with stuff that has no application to his life whatsoever. And that's how that ended up with him. He didn't make it. That is the feminization of the education system. Women deem rules more important than the things they exist to facilitate, whether it's safety or success, carefulness, mindfulness. They don't care about that part. They just care about the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law. The spirit of, you need to see this through to the end and figure out what the goal is, right? You can't teach kids in an environment like that and have them reach their greatest potential. When you do that, what you do is stifle everything about them that isn't about obedience And that's pretty much what a feminized school system is designed to do. Stifle everything in your child except for the part about being obedient. And unfortunately, because we are quick to accuse, we as a society, no, we personally, because don't look at me. But because we are quick to accuse male teachers of being dangerous to children and then ignore it when one after another female teacher makes the news for molesting her children, and schools often just move them on to another system rather than dealing with what they've done. And we have a feminized school system, and it's not getting better. We're not getting more male teachers. Guys aren't going to go into that. They're not going to go into that profession when they know that all they have to do is sneeze and somebody's going to make a sexual allegation. They can't even teach in their classroom with the door closed with a classroom full of kids. They have to worry that everybody's, looking at them as a potential threat. And they have to worry that all they have to do is make one person angry and they're going down. So until that changes, until we start holding female teachers who engage in sexual misconduct accountable and false accusers accountable, in addition to holding male teachers who engage in actual sexual misconduct accountable, this is the environment your kids are going to learn in.
All right.
Yeah, I would have thought reading comprehension has gone down in general in this here age of technology. Reportedly, in the UK, a third of children starting school are not only can they not read, they are unable to, quote unquote, use books correctly, meaning they don't even know how to turn the page of the books. They try to swipe them or tap them because all they know is that child-friendly tablet their parents gave them when they were 3. Now that sounds kind of sad, kind of tragic. Like if for whatever reason this technology becomes no longer available, these kids will be adrift on an ocean of low stimulation and they'll go just fucking stir crazy. But once upon a time, books were the emergent technology. Books were the newfangled, highfalutin, fancy pants way of communicating. Maybe parents back then were worried that their children weren't proficient at talking or memorizing information because all they did was read that information directly from books. What are you going to do without a calculator? What are you going to do without Google? I would imagine people used to say, what are you going to do without books? The next one will be, what are you going to do without AI? Right? These are all good questions, but it turned out books never went away. There was never any shortage of paper or printing presses or people to operate them. And maybe the same goes for the emergent technology of the third millennium. Maybe we don't need to read anymore, just like the people of the second millennium didn't need to memorize information anymore. But there is always the question of, when has it gone too far? And yes, maybe it's reasonable to say now. Now is when it's gone too far. If we're relying on electronic technology that could all disappear in the event of a rather nasty solar flare, or it could all disappear in the event of our infrastructure simply collapsing because the men who maintain that infrastructure are all dead or destitute or have become women. Then it'll be handy if people can fall back on the old school technology of just reading and writing. Otherwise, we'll be in a failed state of people who can barely enough communicate, never mind look after themselves. I'd say it's like getting plunged back into the Stone Age, but people in the Stone Age relied on memorizing things and living off the land. When a space age civilization collapses, it's like being plunged into the Archean era, where there's nothing but bacteria mindlessly wandering the sea looking for other bacteria to eat. It'll be it'll be grim to say the very least. But yeah, no. Evidently, this isn't an issue of technology making children illiterate. Evidently, girls are mostly unaffected. It's an issue of schools just not giving all that much of a fleeting fuck about boys. The lockdowns didn't help, obviously, but schools are willing to help girls through those bad times. But they're not willing to help boys unless those boys get their fucking dicks cut off. Shit like that. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as I alluded earlier, this is why society is going to collapse. Because all this technology that makes our lives so easy and so convenient is maintained by men. And if the men of the future are the boys of the present who are being quietly shunted out of society for being evil oppressors, there will be no one to maintain anything. And then we're fucked. Then we're just apes, we're just chimpanzees with the applied intelligence of bacteria and the survival skills of, I don't know, fucking dead bacteria. We might want to sort it out, folks. We might want to at least get back to, say, 2016, where we were discussing the fundamental problem of the rift between men and women and not getting distracted by all this grief about race and immigration and other such goy slop. Speaking of goys and how much we're hated by certain international villains, I guess we're not speaking about that. Maybe next time, eh? Maybe we'll wait.
Well, I thought I would save it for when we had more information. I think it's still too early to like get too into, but yeah, I mean, and not like a lot of what you're suggesting is I knew all that anyway. It's not news to me. But
indeed.
Okay, so are you done? I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I am indeed. Let's go.
Okay. So we are, yeah, so like I already said in my piece about the education thing, but Mike is correct. If we don't do something about the growing rift between men and women, none of this other shit that people are arguing about is going to matter. It really isn't. And I don't know why people either have a really hard time making peace with this reality or they don't want to. So they're afraid or they like that things are getting worse or whatever it is.
The bigger the cleanup task, the more okay people become with living in the mess.
Yeah.
That's essentially the
It's like hoarders. You ever see Hoarders? Yeah.
Almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Except in politics and social
just like social things, like it's not even political per se. It's like something that we as individuals could like work out. We don't need the government to do it, but people don't want to face this reality. They're fine with calling out, you know, this or that ethnic group or that race or this class of people, but man, women, oh boy, nobody wants to do that. That is terrifying. And
And
yeah, it's a
the
shame.
dumbest part of it is they won't call women out because they're afraid that it hurts women.
Yes.
Right? But if you're trying to achieve success at anything and you're doing an important part of it wrong and you don't see it yourself, or you're coming up with excuses to ignore it, anybody who can see it and doesn't tell you is hindering your success. Even if they don't want to feel bad about telling you, the reason that you're failing at this is because you've missed a step or you're doing it wrong. If you do it this way, it'll be better and you'll have a higher level of success. Because you can't say that to women. Women fail at things or fail to reach their potential at things that they could do much better, much more effectively, much more painlessly. Even things that women have been doing since the dawn of humanity, like parenting.
Yep.
Women are failing at parenting because nobody will say, love your children before you conceive them. Plan ahead. Don't screw around like a dumbass. And don't choose a deadbeat and think that he's going to become a better person just because you made him a dad. But if people can't be blunt with women and people can't tell women, the rules only exist to achieve an end. They are a means to an end. If you use them to prevent that end from being met, then you are in effect breaking the rules yourself. You're essentially acting like an idiot. If you can't tell women things like that, if you can't criticize women, if you can't hold women accountable, women will never reach their potential. So to protect women, you're hurting women.
It's
And
not being
unfortunately,
kind, it's being nice.
yeah, people don't
Like
recognize
being
that.
kind or being good doesn't mean that you always say what is going to make people feel good. It means you tell them the truth. And
That's right.
that hurts, but it's necessary, right? It's to protect them in the long run. So all right, anyway, let us know what you guys think
Exactly.
about this one in the comments. Let me read your super chats and such, and we're going to move on to the next story. So Zeranx gave us 5 and says, what Hannah's talking about is similar to what John Taylor Gatty used to do when he was teaching in New York City. I think he's since passed on.
Yeah.
Thank
You identify the student's learning style and you figure out how to best lead them on their path to self-actualization, to success, to developing their reading skills, to developing their math skills. And if that's how they get good at it, then that's what they should do. It doesn't matter what the norm is.
Yep. All right, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. So, the U.S. Supreme Court has denied Miami Township's petition for a writ of certiorari, refusing to review a $45 million federal jury verdict awarded to Dean Gillespie in November of 2022, the largest wrongful conviction judgment in the history of Ohio. Gillespie from Fairborn, Ohio, spent over 20 years in prison after a 1991 conviction for rape and kidnapping crimes that he did not commit. He was exonerated and released in 2011 following intervention by the Ohio Innocence Project, with charges dropped in 2017 and official recognition as wrongfully imprisoned. This civil lawsuit, filed in 2013, alleged constitutional violations by former Miami Township Detective Matthew Scott Moore, who suppressed exculpatory evidence, including reports on an alternative suspect, and used unfair lineup procedures, leading to the wrongful conviction with no biological evidence linking Gillespie to the crimes. A federal appeals court, the Sixth Circuit Court, upheld the full $45 million award in May of 2025, rejecting the township's arguments to reduce it, despite claims it could financially ruin the community with an annual budget around $20 million, and conflicts with Ohio's indemnification laws capping certain liabilities. Miami Township appealed to the Supreme Court, citing excessive damages, lack of direct responsibility, and potential bankruptcy risks, but the High Court declined to hear the case around January 26th of 2026. Gillespie's attorneys expressed gratitude, calling it the end of the township's legal maneuvers after decades of injustice and urging prompt payment. The township expressed disappointment and intends to protect residents' interests. Excuse me. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Protect residents' interests, leaving enforcement of the judgment ongoing. All right, Hannah, you gave us this story, so
I did, and in the comment section of I believe it was Steve Leto's video about this, there were some people going, the worst thing about this is that the local people's taxes are going to go into paying for this. No, that is not the worst thing about this. The worst thing about this is that a man was wrongfully arrested, wrongly convicted, wrongly imprisoned, and spent over 20 years in prison for crimes that he didn't commit. That's the worst part of it, right? And then, of course, people being upset about, the locals. Simon, I want to tell you how things go locally in elections for prosecutors, because I live in the area. I don't live in Miami Township. I live in Dayton, but and before anybody goes, stop doxing yourself, there's like 100,000+ people in Dayton, so you're gonna have a hard time locating where I am at any given moment. But in any case, local prosecutors run on being tough on crime. They don't run on being just, right? They don't run on coming to the correct conclusion and ensuring that they only prosecute people after being reasonably certain that those individuals are guilty of a crime. They run on being tough on crime. They run on the number of convictions they get. And the local people eat that up and elect them without ever considering that encourages this kind of behavior. And sure, I feel sorry for people who didn't vote for that prosecutor and still have to pay, they're still dealing with being taxed for this probably. There's a little bit more to this story, by the way, that I don't think it made in, but part of the argument that these that the city made, that these officials made, was that they didn't have insurance for this because the company that they were insured with for this went bankrupt in the 90s due to this practice, due to this type of case. And in other words, this has been going on for decades and the behavior has not changed, which means the government hasn't been held accountable for this, even though they've been doing it over and over the entire time. And it's not just Miami Township, right? It's all of Ohio. It's all of the Midwest. It's all of the West. It's all of the East and the South and the North. The entire country does this in response to the Violence Against Women Act. Prior to the Violence Against Women Act, we had the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act of 1984. Signed into law by Ronald Reagan. It gave us 24-hour hotlines. It gave us the recognition that crimes like assault and battery are not suddenly legal just because they take place in the home. It gave us women's shelters, which actually were just domestic violence shelters back in the day. And the funding was for both sexes, not just women. And that was what we needed. That was all we needed for addressing domestic violence. We didn't need something that said, if a woman makes an allegation, you're not allowed to treat her like she might have lied. Right? If she fingers a particular guy as the perpetrator, you shouldn't doubt what she says. Right? We didn't need something that does that. We didn't need something that provides training for judges, prosecutors, and police to always believe the woman and to do everything they can to take away the due process rights of the accused. We didn't need representatives for women to be able to take with them to court to stifle the prosecution of process crimes, where the accuser goes in and the actual allegation is the lie. But we got all of that with the Violence Against Women Act. And as a result, we got a system that is geared toward getting convictions, come hell or high water, in every case that the prosecutor brings, regardless of whether the accused did anything, and regardless of whether the accusation was true or false. Right? That is quite a departure from our constitutional rights, and it is quite a departure from the purpose of laws against intimate partner and sexual violence. They're just supposed to be there to stop intimate partner and sexual violence by discouraging people from engaging in it and helping people who don't seem to be able to stop themselves to learn better ways of handling conflict than to engage in intimate partner and sexual violence. And unfortunately, the situation that you're seeing here, this guy managed to triumph. Out of the entire state, he's the only one I know about that has had a result like this. But I know just from people that I've worked with after I got involved in the movement, dozens of men who have done time in jail for crimes they didn't commit. And I personally know men who have been arrested and been through ordeals because they have been falsely accused of crimes, including one of my childhood friends who went through a 20-year ordeal that I can't even write about because it was so crazy that I can't get my hands on all the documentation I need. There's a lot of stuff that's been suppressed. So yeah, I hope that this stands. I hope that no further appeals can be made. I hope that the community survives it. But I really hope that every prosecutor everywhere is put on notice that if you suppress exculpatory evidence in a case, if you engage in behavior to try to make an innocent man look guilty just so you can pad your record, that this could happen. And general public, every single one of you out there, when you are going to the polls and you are looking at who to vote for, and you see this prosecutor is tough on crime, this prosecutor has a win rate of XYZ, that's the surface. You need to look beyond the surface because what you're looking at might actually be somebody who does this instead of somebody who is actually putting people in jail for crimes they committed. And frankly, there's not enough. There's not enough money in the world to make up for what was done to this man. But 45 million at least is enough to maybe deter other cities and other prosecutors, other court systems from being quite this corrupt.
I'm reminded of the first story we covered tonight. Imagine how many lives could be saved if judges actually sent obviously guilty, violent criminals to prison, not just on their 72nd offense, but on their first offense. Think of how much damage you could avoid to person and property if judges weren't quite so viciously racist in the direction we're not allowed to recognize. I realized lives are the most important and sacred commodity, and the health and safety of those lives. But at the same time, imagine how much money you could save if instead of releasing those bulls back into the China shop, you could put those bulls in some kind of facility where there's nothing they can smash except other bulls. And yes, it sucks if you're an innocent man trapped in a box with hundreds of bulls, but imagine a world where those innocent men are not subjected to that kind of treatment. And imagine how much money you could save by not having to fork out millions of dollars to the innocent men you subjected to this inhumane treatment. Oh no, we can't afford these multi-million-dollar payouts to men we wrongfully convicted. Yes, that does sound like it sucks. But see how this almost never happens with female convicts? Women almost never have to be wrongfully subjected to 20 years in a room with a moose because the state is very careful not to do that to a woman unless they are sure beyond a reasonable doubt that those women are innocent. Don't get me wrong, it would be nice if the state actually clamped down on female criminals, just like it would be nice if they clamped down on men of a certain racial persuasion, if and when they commit 72 crimes. But at the end of the day, there's a reason we have the standard of innocent until proven guilty. Alas, evidently, this standard is subject to failures in the system, and these failures will only get more skewed and more numerous as long as we have fucking libtard judges in charge. I keep saying we as though I get to speak for America, but we have the same problem in Britain to a far greater degree, if anything. But we generally don't get to hear about it in Britain because everything is clamped into an NDA. We in these MRA circles have often compared the plight of men to the plight of black men. Ostensibly, these are both demographics who face disproportionately unlenient charges and disproportionately unlenient verdicts and disproportionately unlenient sentencing for the same crimes. And it's not like the wage gap. The wage gap is an evaluation of outcomes. The legal gap is an evaluation of opportunity, if anything. And at this point, it's pretty obvious that no one is given less lenience than the Untermensch of the woke regime, men of European descent. And it's not just in the last 10 years, it's in the last 30 years, as evidenced by this story. For every Dean Gillespie who had the fortune of being exonerated, there are X amount of men who will never enjoy such fortune and will die in prison for crimes they did not commit. And yes, there are men of every race who face the same hopeless absence of exonerating evidence. I think we should find a middle ground between throwing innocent white men into prison for half a lifetime and releasing non-white men into the wild 71 times before shit happens. And you know where we could locate that middle ground, where we could look for that model? Maybe it's how women are treated in the legal system. If they're clearly guilty, they go to prison. If there is what is called reasonable doubt, we set them free. I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious that the law is too lenient when it comes to female criminals. They get to walk free because of hormones or because of systemic oppression or some shit. like regardless of their race. So maybe we could find a middle ground just below where women are. Men have hormones too. That doesn't excuse anything. So it shouldn't excuse anything for women either. Men can be oppressed too. Even white men. What? What does that mean? I guess it means being convicted and sentenced disproportionately for the same crimes as other people. So maybe don't do that. Maybe don't cite oppression as a mitigating factor while you apply the very discrimination that you call oppression. I don't think I've said anything that any midwit couldn't have thought of. That's what's so annoying. This shit is obvious, and it should be obvious. But to the average midwit, it is not, because the average midwit has been brainwashed into the progressive stack, where people are punished not because of their actions, but because of their skin and their genitals. And unfortunately, the average judge is an average midwit, and the average juror is an average midwit. We live under the tyranny of the average, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what needs to change. Not because the average are evil, but because evil preys on the average. The devil invades not from the top or from the bottom, but into the middle, into the soft underbelly of humanity. And yes, women are more average than men. Women are less diverse than men on every graph that you would care to cite. I said what I said, and you know what I mean. Dr. Random McCann, Munted News, Honey Badger Radio.
Sharing is caring. Okay. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I gave that one. That was for Hannah. But I think it was important.
There is a way to achieve what Mike was talking about. So right now, under the system, the accountability for judges that are corrupt is very low. I mean, you can impeach, but it's very difficult to hold a judge accountable if they engage in any kind of corrupt practices. And prosecutors the same way. If a prosecutor is found to have deliberately hidden or suppressed exculpatory evidence, they can get in some professional trouble. But you know what doesn't happen? They don't go to jail. Right? And if we changed the laws so that in a court case, a defendant has the right to submit their evidence, and judges and prosecutors cannot legally suppress it, and then they do it anyway. If they do it anyway, they go to jail. That might change quite a bit in terms of how frequently innocent people get sent to jail. The law could simply say that, yeah, the prosecutor can make any argument to the judge or the jury that he or she wants to make about this evidence, but it cannot be suppressed. If the defense enters it as exculpatory evidence, it is entered. And if the prosecutor cannot argue as to why it should not be considered, or it does not prove what the defense is trying to use it to prove, then the prosecutor does not deserve to win the case. That would be a very simple way of protecting against wrongful conviction. And if you run into a case where a judge or a prosecutor does engage in shenanigans to keep that evidence out of the courtroom, then and it can be proved that evidence could have made a difference in the case, then that individual should go to jail. That should be an offense that leads to imprisonment equal to what was faced by the individual they were prosecuting or who was on trial. That would fix the problem. I think that would fix the problem.
All right. Wise words once again from the pun master in chief, Hannah. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Let me just see. I didn't see any super chats or chows this time. Man, you guys have been. It's sometimes it's just kind of front loaded. So let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're gonna move on to the final story, which could be a little bit of good news, I guess. So it's always good to see that. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. All right. So the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, under Chairman Andrew N. Ferguson, issued warning letters on January 30th. Hopefully they were sternly worded. To 42 major U.S. law firms regarding their participation in Diversity Lab's Mansfield Certification Program. The program, active since around 2017, certifies firms that ensure at least 30% of candidates considered for leadership roles, promotions, and sometimes hiring come from underrepresented groups, often defined by their race, gender, or other characteristics, i.e., not straight white men, with a plus level for meeting concrete benchmarks. The FTC described this as potentially unfair and anti-competitive under antitrust laws, alleging that firms' involvement, including knowledge-sharing calls with competitors, could constitute collusion that distorts labor market competition in the legal profession, affecting hiring, pay, promotions, and talent allocation based on DEI metrics rather than merit alone. Ferguson emphasized that such coordination harms workers by reducing independent decision-making and potentially lowering wages or opportunities. The action aligns with broader Trump administration's scrutiny of DEI initiatives, including prior executive orders targeting firms like Paul Weiss, Wilmer Hale, Perkins Coie, Skadden Arps, and Latham and Watkins, some of which settled by pledging pro bono work or faced successful legal challenges. The letters sent to prominent firms such as Covington and Burling, Gibson Dunn, Latham and Watkins, Paul Weiss, Perkins Coie, Skadden, Sidley Austin, and others, collectively employing tens of thousands of attorneys, serve as a reminder of potential liability without alleging specific violations or launching enforcement yet. No immediate responses from the firms were detailed in reports, and the move reflects ongoing regulatory pressure amid rollbacks of corporate DEI programs, though a prior federal ruling had upheld the Mansfield program as non-discriminatory and without quotas. So, obviously, the Trump administration, being a government institution, cannot, put this on privately owned institutions, but they can essentially make suggestions. So it's sort of like changing the climate so that other organizations might respond. And it may, I think, it may have an effect. I mean, I think that we are obviously like feeling the effects of DEI in a number of ways, because essentially in the cases where people who are unqualified, let's say, start to affect it. And, Helen Andrews, who I often bring up on this channel and my channel, who wrote the piece for Compact, I believe, called The Great Feminization, explained that when you have an overly feminized workplace, it's going to, like, you reach a critical mass of women in any given field, it's going to affect the way that business operates. And her primary concern was that it was going to be a really big problem if you have too many women in law, because especially if they're not there because they're good at their job. And this is actually affecting law firms, and I think that is true, right? Because like judges were usually started off as lawyers. So we are looking at this from the systemic level and trying to, at least this is trying to address that. So anyway, those are my thoughts on that. You guys go ahead and give your thoughts.
If your criterion is underrepresented and your numerical marker is 30%, then surely your aim is to make sure that whoever makes up 30% of the population makes up 30% of the workforce. Now, this undercuts women and it overcuts black people, who I believe are 14% of the US population. So what exactly are you working towards the if you've got a hard 30%, then I mean, even if you employ black people, then you're over-representing black people because there are only 14%. But even if you're getting women on board, I mean, you would have to go to 50%, wouldn't you? Because women are 51% of the population, and so how I mean, you're not going to stop until you get 50% of your workforce being women, and none of this makes sense. Everything was operating just fine when you did things meritocratically, when you put white males in charge, because whites are the majority of the population. It depends on whether or not Hispanics count as white, and to be honest, I think they fucking do. But then you have to factor in the degree to which women count as part of the population. But if women don't want to do that job, then why the fuck would you enforce this policy where 30% of the workers have to be women? And that'll never be enough. You'll keep going until they are 50% of the workforce. And that's not going to work because even though women make up 51% of the population, it doesn't necessarily follow that women are going to be just as good at the job as men. Nor does it follow that non-white men will be just as good at the job as white men. And yeah, I'm struggling as to how to get this idea across without sounding racist and misogynist. But here I am, trying to get this across.
Face to face, a couple of silver spoons.
Oh, jeez. Don't do that. There's another issue with this that people rarely consider when it comes to women. Women, the percentage of the female population, the adult female population, let's say adult being 15 and up, because I think you can work with your parents' permission at age 15 and without it at age 16. So let's say the percentage of the adult female population age 15 and over that wants to work, that seeks jobs, that goes out and applies and takes jobs and actually, shows up and does some degree of work, is not as high as the percentage of the male population that goes out looking for jobs and seeks them, right? Fills out applications or sends out resumes, whatever, and then fills a position and does the job. The reason for that is because it is more socially acceptable, and it is also more natural for a woman to feel comfortable raising children her full-time job until they're of a certain age, and running a household, and maybe she'll work part-time after her kids are a certain age. And that has been historically normal throughout the entire industrial age. Prior to that, when more people were, the person who shod your horses did so in his own barn at his own home, and the person you went to, if you didn't bake your own bread, was running the bakery out of their home, and the whole family was part of it. You'd see more family participation in work, right? But it's always been a thing of like women of the lower income ranges, women in families that were too poor to just have one income and survive. They're the ones that have gone out and sought jobs because they had to. But you don't see as you get up into the higher echelons of income where the husband earns quite a bit of money, you don't see as many women who feel obligated to contribute to the household finances so much that they go out and get a job. Now, that has, to a degree, changed in the last couple generations, but it's changed out of necessity. And what you end up with is, because of DEI policies, more men are giving up on being able to find gainful employment or find gainful employment that is sufficient to support their family. And more women are ending up filling the void. And sometimes it's because this is what they want to do. Sometimes it's because they like to work and they prefer to work. Sometimes it's because the dad is the better nurturer. In my household, right, my husband is the better nurturer. Even though I can do it very well, he thinks of things that I don't. Right, when it comes to raising our kids, he was the better nurturer, and there's a lot of stuff I learned from him. But I don't think that that's always the case, where you have, um, one sex being the better nurturer and the other sex being the better suited to just not be there. And when it comes down to it, finding a 50-50 ratio in your workplace of women to men, it's made more difficult by the fact that you don't have a 50-50 ratio of applicants. Now, what DEI does is it comes in and says it doesn't matter whether they want to work or not. It doesn't matter whether they're good at the job or not. It doesn't matter whether the company benefits from hiring this person or not. If you don't have that 50-50 ratio, we're going to penalize you. We're going to treat you like you're not doing things right. You have screwed up. You have failed. When in reality, let's say your goal is to sell things, and you have a company where half of your applicants are really, really good at selling things, and half of them suck at selling things. You want the ones that are really, really good at selling things, regardless of whether they're male, female, black, white, tall, short, ugly, pretty. Doesn't matter. Right? As long as they're good at selling things, that's who you want to hire. You don't want to have to focus on whether they're male or female. You don't want to have to focus on whether they're one ethnic background or another, what their religion is, anything like that. You just want to focus on, are they going to bring in customers? Are they going to get those customers to buy things? Are the customers going to come back and buy things the next time they need those things? And unfortunately, what DEI says is, we don't care if you make money. We don't care if your company is successful. We don't care if you sell things. We care if you have an equal number of men and women working for your company. We care if you have an equal number of men and women on your board. Or better yet, women should outnumber men. That's more equality, right? Because women outnumber men. DEI isn't about business. It's not about common sense. It's not about doing things with success in mind. It's just about rules and imposing those rules and enforcing those rules. And it's almost designed to destroy your company. So, it really doesn't matter if half the population is this or half the population is that. Right? If half the population isn't applying for your company, it's unfair to tell you to get a 50-50 ratio. And it's similarly, if half the population was black, but half the population didn't want to go into car sales because maybe they were interested in some other career. Your car place shouldn't insist that half your car salesmen have to be black. Like it's not common sense. If it was common sense, people would have understood this back in the 90s when they were calling it oh shoot, I can't even remember. Affirmative action, when they were calling it affirmative action. But even then, people thought, "Oh, we're making up for discrimination," but you're not, because you can't make up for what happened to people 50 years ago. Which pretty soon we keep talking about this. The 90s will be 50 years ago, but you can't make up for what happened to people 50 years ago by doing things to people today, other people that didn't have anything to do with it. So maybe the government's not the best way to achieve this. Maybe the government's not, the best vehicle for imposing the end of DEI. Obviously, the shoppers are, right? The public is. But the one thing that we can ask is that the government get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, as usual, that's true. I think that the article is trying to make the case that there should be some, perhaps implying that the government's action should affect like private people. But I think that the problem is that people are influenced by the things the government does. So I'm not saying it should be that way. I think that people should exercise free will because they have it, but it seems like people are moved by what it's like they're waiting for the state to give them permission to act a certain way. And they're basically following that lead,
laws.
even though the state isn't passing any laws. They're not sending guys with guns down to the law firms to tell them to do this. They're just denouncing it publicly and loudly. Trump's critical of DEI loudly. And so companies are like, oh, I guess this isn't cool anymore. And they're basically like thinking, if he says this and the people voted for the guy who says this, then we probably should consider changing our approach, or at least look into it, because it's going to affect us. So it's not to say that there's like hard power there.
What I'm seeing in this story is different than that, a little bit different from that. There are laws in place. There are anti-discrimination laws in place that have been in place for a long time. And like what they mentioned here, not monopoly laws, but it was something similar. Antitrust laws, so it is monopoly laws. But yeah, it's unfair and anti-competitive, basically, under antitrust.
Yeah, that's what I saw. I know,
so
but
what they're talking about is using existing law and enforcing existing law in a way that hasn't been previously enforced when the people facing discrimination are not the people that are historically deemed minorities, which is fair. And I think the best thing that the government can do is essentially not pass any new laws, not take any new like policies into consideration or anything like that, other than take the laws that already exist and enforce them without regard to any historical, this group was discriminated against where this one wasn't, and simply say if a form of discrimination is prohibited under that law, or a form of preferential treatment is prohibited under that law, it doesn't matter whether it's a protected demographic or not. Just eliminate the concept of protected demographics altogether. And if the law becomes ridiculous under the circumstances where you've eliminated protected demographics versus unprotected similar demographics, then that law needs to go away.
I agree. I think that there shouldn't be any anti-discrimination laws at all. But if they're going to exist, I think the best way for them to disappear is to apply them equally. And then maybe people will think about them in terms of just principle. and then eliminate it, because I believe in freedom of association 100%. And if you want to be, if you only want to hire a certain group or you want to exclude people, you go ahead, but it can affect it can affect your bottom line. But I think that it's the best way forward, because otherwise it will be used in slanted ways, which is how it's been used probably for as long as it's existed. So yeah, so like that's what I'm saying. Like I fundamentally don't think the state should be doing it. I think they're just going to take what already exists and they're just going to apply it in the way it probably should have always been applied, which is universally, which essentially just creates a situation where, going forward, people are going to have to choose between one of two things. They're either going to, ensure that we enforce anti-discrimination laws, but we got to do it across the board, right? Which kind of like eliminates the point of having them in the first place, because I believe that most anti-discrimination policy or law was passed not specifically to avoid some kind of like bigotry, but rather to essentially like, be able to put people in positions that are undeserving or give them additional help, because they're trying to get to this. And that's, if I'm being very charitable, they're trying to achieve some kind of sense of equality. But it's not how it goes. I mean, and the thing is too, is that even if you get rid of all that, you're not going to eliminate inequality anyway, and even like unfair kinds of inequality. Like women are probably gonna be more favorable hires simply because companies can pay them less, and and they'll just take it, right? So like there is still going to shake out in certain ways regardless, but I think the ultimate goal in the long run would be to eliminate anti-discrimination laws altogether. But I know that's a pipe dream, because most people would take issue with that, but maybe that's changing anyway.
Yeah, I will say this, when it comes to law firms, as opposed to, say, I don't know, the fire department, I'm more
the
trusting
military
of women working in that field, because bitches do like to argue. I mean, look at me. But than I am of women. I've met one female firefighter that I'm like, okay, I would trust this person to carry me out of a building, and that woman was as big as a man. You could tell she was definitely female. She wasn't trans. Like, she was definitely biologically female. But she was, if you couldn't look at her and tell, if you looked at her from behind, you would have thought that was a dude with a ponytail, and that's it. I'm the whole thing about DEI is that it doesn't care about the goals of the job.
Sure.
It cares about giving government or giving woke ideologues control over your company. That's all it's really about, control.
Yep. All right. Let's see. I got another super chat, and then we're gonna go into the patron show. So, Senior Sticks says for $5. Thank you, Senior Sticks. As DEI benefits white Western women the most, is it time for white Western women to step aside and give up their position?
So let me remind you what I said earlier about lack of accountability preventing people from meeting their full potential. DEI needs to be eliminated because of the discrimination against men. But there isn't this silver lining in it for women. It just keeps women from working hard enough and being self-critical enough to reach their potential. So there isn't even a good excuse or even a mediocre excuse for why we should keep it. It's shit all the way through.
Yeah.
As much as I hate white women, right? Let us not forget for a moment that women in general are like this. Like, people keep saying that this is all the fault of white Western women. Bitch, have you met women from anywhere else? They're the fucking same. Right? Like,
Yeah.
let's not fall into this trap of blaming everything on white people. Like, women are arseholes. White women, black women, yellow women, fucking Jewish women, especially Jewish women. They're like, let's not fall into this trap. Like it's women. Like Nick Fuentes said to Tucker, it's just the women.
It's the women.
It's the women.
Honestly, it's the women.
And as long as female accountability is not a thing, that will continue.
Yep. That's all we got to do is just treat them like adults, and that'll be it. But like, too many people are afraid to do that. Okay. Anyway, thank you for the super chat, Senior Sticks. Now we're gonna head into the patron show and look at this article from Piers Morgan's wife, who apparently can't stand the idea of having to take care of the man she married. I mean, I get it. It's Piers Morgan, but you married him. So we're going to be looking at this in the patron show. Hopefully we'll see you guys there. And again, if you want to join us for that, you become a badger. Go to feedthebadger.com and start a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into the Discord where you'll be able to watch all the additional content. And like this video that we're about to start after this is over. So I want to thank Mike and Hannah for their lovely commentary on today's stories. I want to thank you guys most of all for watching. And thanks to Mike J for helping me with the write-ups for today's show. All right, with that said, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.